Hey, what's up? This is Brian from the Goth Signals and all that stuff. You know me. But right now you're listening to Brian from Void Signal here on Void Signal. Void Signal. Brian's all the way down.
Fighting on and never put the weapons down. The stormy weather's got society in chains. Like you holding on and hoping for big times.
I know what you're thinking. Brian, you make me smile all the time. How do I repay such a favor? Well, in addition to clicking all the little social media buttons for anything Void Signal related, you can also visit voidsignal.net to leave me a tip, or head over to shirtclown.com to purchase Void Signal merchandise. There's a mug, there's a shirt, there's a hoodie. They're pretty banging. Those are great ways to support the podcast, in addition to sending me positive feedback. Drop me a message, drop me a line, drop me a comment on whatever, and I don't know, say something nice, please. Anyway, thanks so much for your consideration. I hope you're well, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.
Oh, good, man. I'm just getting my life sorted out here.
Yeah, I feel you.
Giant
So we are already recording. We'll just start here while, I'll just have you talk while I
Cool.
finish my sandwich because I don't know. If you can't handle me
At
eating
my worst.
at my eating a fish sandwich, then
Yeah.
you
What are
know,
we doing here?
then what are we even doing here? Um
Yeah. It's funny.
how's it going, man? It's good to talk to you again. I haven't had a chance to.
Oh, it's been a minute, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mechanismus feels like forever ago at this
No
point.
kidding.
Uh,
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I think I had 3 shows that week.
mhm.
And I had like other friends' shows that I had agreed to go to. So, it was pretty stacked with things. And so I actually only went to two or three of the nights of Mechanismus, unfortunately, but it was like one of the highlights of that festival for me was seeing Health. They were just absolutely ridiculously good, and happy I was there for that.
Yeah, same. Man, your performance at Mechanismus is what really, drew me to what you were doing.
Thank you.
Because, honestly, I was there just as an audience member. I had never heard your music before, and I mean, the
Right.
vibe that
I
kind of
figured.
yeah, the vibe that kind of went through the crowd was good, man. It was like people were really responding to it and like having fun, and it was nice. Just from the other side of it as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, just to kind of give you some insight on that. So like I come from a family of musicians, like professional musicians, like my mom and dad are, you know, um, pros, and they do that for their job. Like my uncle is a professional musician as well. And so I've always been kind of like around people who are much more talented than I, but like in the
Sure.
first few years of me being an electronic artist, that was like on the tail end of like 20 years of me being in like metal bands and stuff, right? So I'd been in like metal bands as like, like the screeching singer or the guitar guy or the drummer guy. And I'm a multi-instrumentalist, but the thing is when I was doing electronic music, it tends to be more programmed, I guess is the word I would say, but like it's one of those things
Sure.
where like I noticed how boring it was for the audiences to watch electronic shows, especially if it's the type of show where effectively you're hitting play and then you're singing along to it, or you're not really demonstrating a lot of skill in music necessarily, because it's more of just a recording kind of playback sort of thing, right? And so I started to realize that, like, hey, like if I really want people to enjoy my show, I should be more musical than I have been, like, in the early days of my stuff that I was putting out as user, right? So I was like,
Sure.
okay, I'm gonna start like, recruiting friends as bandmates, and I'm gonna start like kind of like sprucing up the show. And I joined forces with a buddy of mine, Travis, who he's an exceptional guitarist and singer for a band called the Evenings. And so I ended up becoming a guitar player in the evenings as like just to scratch the itch of guitar playing for me, because that's what I had been doing all these years prior. But then I was like, hey, like, why don't you just join my band too? And we could just really make these shows a lot more fun. And so he's playing keys. He's also doing a lot of like the live DJing stuff with like the crazy master bus effects and all the weird transitions. And then I'm playing the
Right.
guitar and I'm singing. And then we really got crazy and built a very nice wireless rig. And so now we could do all sorts of in the box effects on my voice and all sorts of stuff. And by the time we got to Mechanismus, it was pretty well oiled in the sense that we had played that particular version of a set, not version specifically, but like we'd play that kind of setup for maybe four shows, like within like weeks of that. And so we were like super aligned and like really well rehearsed and stuff. And so when we did the Mechanismus thing, the question that was always like gonna be for me is like, this is an industrial festival. Will they enjoy the fun that we're having? Right?
Right.
Because like
Sure.
you don't want to be like the fish out of water and like, oh, like this is too happy or too anything. And I wouldn't really consider my music happy, to be honest. It's pretty dark, but like,
Mm.
but the vibe of it in that setting is more like, hey, we're having fun. This is a party. And like, so I did notice that some of the folks were having quite a lot of fun, and that was all I care about. Like, really, it's just like, hey, you guys, like, The reason why you're not on your asses at home is because you want to have a good time at a show. So I'm going to give you a show. Let's do this.
Mm.
And that's just like my philosophy these days is like do more like human stuff and lean into it. That's, I've got a new record that I'm working on that's very much in that mindset, and I'm adding a bunch more guitar playing to it and like doing a lot of weird new things. And just got to stay evolving, right? Like you don't want to put out for the same record. You
For
gotta
sure. Um,
go on.
well, first off, thank you for talking. And while I was finishing my food, but secondly, like, no, it's cool to like hear like what went into it, because the performance at Mechanismus. I mean, like, were you nervous about like the crowd sort of just being like, who the fuck are these guys? Like,
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like, well, I would say like nervous isn't necessarily the right word, but
sure,
like holding my breath a little bit. I'll give you that. Like in the
okay,
sense that like it's important to me that people have a good time.
mm-hmm.
Like, and if they're not having a good time, then it's hard for me to have a good time, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like the only thing that could really go wrong there is like either like the genre gap is too big and they're
Mm-hmm.
just not into it, or they think that we're not good at what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, we had like kind of framed the right type of show where it was just heavy enough, it was just weird enough, and it was just competent enough to where like at least it was cool to watch, even if you like weren't a huge fan of that style of music. But like
Mm-hmm.
the thing is that for me, like having come from this background where like, my parents are musicians, like, so for instance, like my mom and my uncle were like touring members of the Righteous Brothers back in the 80s and 90s, if
Oh
you've ever
wow,
heard of them.
yeah, absolutely.
So I spent like years as a child like on the road touring with them, like in,
Mm-hmm.
around all these world-class musicians. And um so the thing is that like I don't have any allegiance to any particular kind of music because I really truly enjoy the best of all of it. Like there's so much talent out
Mm-hmm.
there. And so like I feel like there just isn't enough time in the day to like pay homage to all of the things that I love, right?
Right,
Like
sure,
I love heavy music, I love riffy music, I love electronic vibey music, I love just like
sure.
fucking rhythmic, percussive, syncopated stuff. I love hip hop stuff. Like I love all of this stuff, right? And so like for me, like as a writer, the problem I have is like not throwing in the everything in the kitchen sink every single time I write a song. Like having
Mm-hmm.
restraint is actually the biggest problem I have. And so like on that regard, like if you're going into an industrial festival where everything kind of has that grungy, heavy, pulsating sort of vibe to it,
Mm-hmm.
then like my combination of tastes filtered through the lens of heavy electronic music is gonna feel a lot different. And so like you just never know how the crowd is gonna take it. And like so my whole thing is like, hey, like as long as we're having fun and we're like really like
Mm-hmm.
I'll just put it this way. Somebody once told me that like songwriting is basically just you putting your taste in music on display. That's all songwriting is. And like so I feel like a show is an extension of that. It's like, hey, like this is the stuff that I dig,
Mm-hmm.
enjoy. Like that's it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. No, for sure, and
Because
it
yeah, I
definitely
mean
came
the worst thing in
across.
the world is yeah, it's like the worst thing in the world is if you write for tastemakers or something like, oh, like I'm gonna write this type of song so that way you'll playlist me or something. Like that's the worst because then like you get like cookie cutter stuff that has no opinion. And like the thing that I think is like really really important, especially in like a super saturated like internet world that we live in, is like music that doesn't have a strong opinion. It's like what are you even doing? Like what is the
Right.
point? Like take really strong stances, like take bold risks, do things that are going to make people either love you or hate you, but don't do something in the middle because then it's like, what's the point?
Right. That
Yeah,
feels like pandering, because you're just like you're just looking to be the most popular
right.
guy in the room. If you are
Yeah.
not, if you are, and I agree with you. If you are, and that's one of the things I like so much about Morris Black, and so many others in the industrial genre, is because part of what makes it so appealing to me is that, you know, I still have a lot of that teenage rebellion angst of like,
Yeah.
we have to fucking do something. We have to,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
take stances and have opinions and be loud about them. And that was the thing that like, that drew me to the genre to begin with. And I agree with you. Like, I think all artists have to do that, especially now. I mean, you don't have
Yeah,
much
like
of a choice.
we're all
Like,
coming to a crossroads, man. Like it is what it is.
yeah,
Like you're either making a statement or you aren't. And if you aren't, then what are you doing? Right. And it's
right.
like, and that's not to say that I think my, you know, shit doesn't stink or whatever. Like I know that I have areas that I can grow as an artist as well. And I'm always trying to like find new things that make me excited. But like, you know, at the end of the day, like you can always smell it when there's an artist who's like really just trying to be safe. And like, it's not that fun to listen to be honest with you.
Mhm. No,
So
I
I don't know.
agree. And I also feel like that there are artists who sort of, I don't know, like I'm all for having strong opinions and being loud about them and sort of, you know, being on the right side of history when it comes to certain things. But
Yeah.
excuse me,
No
I also
kidding.
feel like there's that risk of like doubling down too hard of like, I mean, at least inside the industrial genre, I can't really speak for, you know, anything else, but it's like, I don't know, I see bands that I'm just like, man, just turn the knob back a little. Like you're trying
Oh yeah.
so hard, and it's like
So hard, yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I
that's me.
agree with you.
I feel
I
like
agree with
that's me just being shitty old man, but it's like, you know.
No. I think you're right. Like there's definitely like there's an element of, so at the end of the day, like as songwriters, like part of what we're doing is curating our taste, but we're also making editorial choices, right? And like the editorial choices are like, should I lean into this vibe, or should I look this certain way, or should I push this particular theme, or like find this boundary and cross it or whatever. And like if you're just turned up to 11 all the time, then in itself that's another form of being bland. Like you got to mix it up, right?
I feel like I'm going a little bit crazy. Look around, all I see are contradictions. It's enough to make you go insane. If you don't see it, you're not paying attention. Or maybe you're just in on the game. You can share your thoughts anywhere in the world, and you can barely look me in the eyes. You can wave your love like a gun into the air, still not give a fuck if I die. It's okay to go a little bit crazy. Maybe it's not you, it's the world. Sometimes we just gotta go crazy. Shadow line this broken world.
So it's like if some, like it's one of those things. It's like I used to listen to just like straight like metal all the time, and I remember like I started to get like
See, you
burnt
don't
out.
strike me. You don't strike me as a metal dude at all.
Oh no, I was like I was a drummer in a metal band, I was a singer in a metal band, I was a guitarist in a metal band. Like I've paid my dues in metal for sure. But like it's one of those
Gotcha.
things where I like when I was growing up and like, Metallica and Pantera were like the way to become like a proficient guitar player.
Hmm.
Is like you would just like listen to them and like if you could follow in their footsteps, you would become a good guitar player, right? Well, at the same time, there was like two different worlds forming outside of that. There was like the ultra heavy shit. There was the new metal shit. And the ultra heavy stuff was like, Obituary or Deicide or like bands like that, right? Like
Hmm.
super heavy, like deathy sort of metal bands, right? That were like no longer in the mainstream of metal. And it was so far heavy that it was like, hey, you could only really listen to it so much before it was like, hey, this is all blending in and like now I'm kind of
Yeah.
bored or something, right? And like on the other hand, there's like the kind of new metal thing, which was like the rock rap thing of like Limp Bizkit
Hmm.
and Korn and all those types of bands, and then you also had um just basically this vibe of like, hey, like we're making a form of pop music that is like really heavy. Like at the time, I was like kind of a gatekeeper type of mentality where I'm just like, oh, this is bullshit. I hate this. This is all super lame, and it took me a while of like years of reflection and just kind of moving on past all of it to really get over that sort of feeling of like, oh, this is lame because it's not heavy enough. But in reality, it's all gonna have the same sort of impact in the sense that if it's like too similar for too sustained a time, then it's just gonna blend in, and then you're just
Right.
gonna like not care anymore. And like so you can't just be like, you know, you can't just be like hailing Satan every fucking second of the day, like all the time. Like it's just
That's
boring after a while. Like, you know what I mean? Like
No,
mix it
I
up.
feel you. Yeah, yeah. No, I feel you. I mean, hats off to the bands who try, but
It's
I
tough.
I like to yeah, I like to keep it real. Like, people have, shit to do. But I mean, I think that's kind of like what comes across with a lot of your music, honestly. Like I've been listening to your catalog, and like one of the things that comes across is just sort of and it came across, I feel, in your performance at Mechanismus as well, was just sort of like, and maybe this is due in part to being based out of Seattle, based on my experience there, but like, just being like, I don't know, looking to, what am I trying to say here? Sort of open on all wavelengths, just kind of trying to make human to human connections with people and have a
Yeah.
good time and be like, not necessarily try and have such a huge ego as to be like, oh, I'm bringing the party with me, but like, hey, I
Oh
just
yeah,
got here,
yeah.
let's make one happen, kind of a thing, I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. Yeah, it's exactly right. And like that's actually one of the funny things is that I'm actually I've some of my friends were sort of split on this topic as to like what the real role of an artist at a show is, right?
Hmm.
So some folks are like, fuck the audience, like I'm here to like perform my heart and soul, like as it stands, right? Or whatever. And then some people are on the complete opposite side of that, which is just like, hey, like this is a party, and if the party doesn't happen, then I have failed. I'm kind of like in between that in the sense that like I really do care that like people have a good time. I want the music to hit
Hmm.
hard on the system. I want people to be impressed with the music that they see, and I want them to be thinking about it. But I don't want to be like lacking self-awareness either, where I'm just like, oh, like I'm just standing up here looking into the mirror, like reflecting on my, like
Yeah,
all that
yeah,
shit, like that kind of like weird somber vibe that some artists get, and like, and
yeah.
I don't know, it's like it's all a spectrum, and we're all kind of making editorial choices at the end of the day. Like this is our choice to be a certain way,
Hmm.
and
I mean, you should
yeah,
want your audience to have fucking fun. They paid to be there.
dude, you'd be surprised. Some people have not come to that conclusion yet. Like you
Like,
would be surprised.
that blows my mind. It's like, why would you not? Why would you not care? Like, they
Yeah,
paid
like exactly.
dollars to fucking see you. Like,
I agree. And
man.
that's what's so strange about it. I'm just like, hey, like, are you trying to get butts and seats or not? Like, if you want
Right.
people to come out, like they should be expecting to have a good time, right? Like, are
Yeah,
we on the same page?
absolutely.
Like, and they're like, I don't know, like I'm here to do what I do. Like, all right, dude.
And nonetheless, like, especially if you walk into a performance with that kind of a vibe, especially like at a festival, like what, like, or
Yeah,
you're opening for people who maybe are unfamiliar with music, like, why would you want to present yourself that way? Of like, hey, I'm a fucking hard ass, everybody. Like, let's get, fuck all y'all.
yeah.
Like, what?
I'm misunderstood. Yeah, like that kind of thing.
Uh,
And
all right.
well, it is actually
Okay.
kind of funny that so like like I toured in 2020,
Mm,
like in March and February and March, which, as you know, is like the exact time that the pandemic struck.
right.
So I had to come home from tour, and I was like doing a US tour, so I was up and down West Coast, East Coast, and Canada, and I was like playing a fair share of headlining slots, and then when I like came back after the pandemic, um, I started like becoming like openers for touring acts that were coming through town, and I
Mm,
noticed that like you're either energetic live or you're not. And like when I would really lean into energy and just being like really out there and like having fun and just like kind of like pressuring the audience to make a decision one way or another, I noticed that all of the bands who came afterwards would have a better set. Like they would have a
mm,
better time because the crowd was already past the point of no return. We had already set the tone. But like on the other hand, when I had like low energy openers for me, like it would almost sort of like ice the closer in a way, Like it would
right.
be like, okay, everyone's just like having like coffee house vibe right now and nobody's into it, and like, okay, now it's time for the
Right.
headliner, like, and
Right. And then at
and
that
so
point,
yeah.
the pressure's on even more because it's like now you have to try and pick everybody up, kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so like basically like my mentality now is like whenever I open for anybody else, my job is to basically like shake the cobwebs off of the crowd by the time they walk on stage. Like that's the only thing I'm really thinking about. And
Right. And I think that goes
it's
back
it's
to,
fun. It's honestly kind of
yeah,
fun. It's like being a pinch hitter or something. It's like, oh yeah, it's like this is a specific role I'm playing right now, and I'm gonna give
right.
that to you, and here you go.
And it comes back to like making sure people are having a good time. Like people who have a good time want to continue having a good time, and they want to share their money and their joy and they want to share
Yeah,
everything with people they're having a good time with, and
that's for
that
sure,
should
man.
be like priority one on for any performing artist. Is make sure people have a good time. Like no matter how minimalistic the show might be, because I mean, like
Yeah,
you were a mechanismus, you saw it. Like you can get up there with
yeah,
just be a
just yourself.
person
Yeah,
behind some computers pushing some buttons, but you can make it very engaging. You can make it very a performance. You can make it something fun that people remember and people that laugh at. And
100%, hundred
oh
percent.
man, like that's so important anymore. Like I just feel like I don't have time for the like, the kind of macho frontman kind of fucking like
Yeah.
like to think about like what people went through back in the day of like, oh, did you hear about like Axl Rose pissing on a fan or something, some shit like that, like all these old fucking stories. It's like,
Sorry,
dude,
I
that
think you
shit
meant to
would,
say pissing on a Lucky fan.
yeah, however you
No, just
like,
kidding.
yeah. But it's
No,
like,
yeah,
but
no,
I
I
mean,
totally
like,
agree with you.
dude, nowadays, like the moment one of my, I go to see one of my favorites and their dick comes out, I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like,
What are we doing?
I,
What are we
like,
doing with this penis?
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Like, it's wild how much it's changed, but I'm so glad. Like, no more of this. Like,
yeah,
I like the
it's
transparency and just people being people.
yeah, I agree with you there. And like that's like literally like every time I talk to anybody who works in like the record industry, the only thing they ever say, they all agree on this. They always say the same thing, and that is authenticity is the key. Like the reason
Mm-hmm.
why they say that is because like people can smell fakeness.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not being authentic, then you're basically holding yourself back because like
Right.
and actually to just sort of tie this back in with like the way that I've been writing music for the last few years is like so if you look at my discography, it starts with 1985, which was kind of like me pandering a little bit, if I'm being honest. Like I was pandering to like the synth crowd.
If I'm being
And
honest with you, it came across that way.
yeah, and I
I,
hate that record for that reason.
let me just stop you for 1 second, and I just want to emphasize that, like, I, you know, I've expressed to you privately previously that, like, I really like what you're doing, and I like what you're bringing to music as a whole, and I really enjoy your music and your style. But I did visit with that record, and it did come across as like maybe a little insincere, or maybe a little bit like
Yeah,
I'm kind
right.
of I'm kind of fishing for something to land, kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically that was what I was like vibing to at the
Hmm.
time. But the thing
Sure.
is like in hindsight, I felt like I had not written it through the lens of like a lot of the real things that I was going through. I had sort of written it through the lens of like the fantasy that I was like wanting to sort of write about. And like that is two
Sure.
different things, right?
Right.
And so when I then got to my second record, Influence, it was like we were knee deep in this whole like this era of like everybody quantifies their own self-worth through the likes and through like the followers and all that shit. And like
Hmm.
everything is like the lens of social media. So I was like, you know what? Like I want to write a record about just like how fucked it is to live in this kind of world now. And so
Hmm.
that album Influence was literally about love and about fakeness and about all of the things that we experience on a daily basis through the lens of like this kind of game that we play, which is
Hmm.
influencer culture, right? And
Right.
so that whole record was a lot more sincere in the sense that these things were like real problems that are really like hurting people, right? They're like real things. And
Hmm.
then when I got to uh Dreams and Nightmares, I wrote that record periodically, like incrementally throughout the pandemic, right? Over a period of 18 months. And every single that I put out was like how I felt at that particular week or month, right? And so the
Hmm.
first song that I put out at the very beginning of the pandemic was Oasis, and the last song that I put out was, Everybody Move Your Body, right? And so like if you like listen to that record all the way through end to end in order, you actually hear what happened in my life for those 2 years. And the sort of like the hope of like, oh man, I'm gonna make it. Like I finally got this tour going. I got all these good things going for me. I feel really good about shit. Like I got a good job. And then all of a sudden everything just crashes and burns and nothing but despair around everybody, right? And I was just
Right.
like, oh man, this is fucked. And you basically sit at home drinking to get through the pain or watching TV all day long or working or just like stressing yourself out, all the shit that we went through for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then that sort of like deep lust for escapism starts to occur where you're just like, fuck, like anything to make me feel like I'm not here right now. Like that's all I feel. And so like literally the album goes from like extreme joy and optimism to like everything's falling apart
Hmm.
to like this like deep like feeling of escapism, like where it's just like I'm standing there on soma pills like in a crowd going, everybody fucking move your body, like feeling like we're zombies like trying to make it through.
I still hear shots in the night, and the streets under city lights. Whole neighborhoods are wild, 'cause they're not gonna take it no more. Everybody start a war. Don't let them push you down. Everybody start a war. Gotta get up from the ground. I still see tears in their eyes, hearts filled with burning fires. A 10-ton cannon fight, explosions in the night. Everybody start a war. Don't let them push you down. Everybody start a war. Gotta get up from the ground. Everybody start a. Everybody on the ground, Don't hesitate, get on the ground. Let your voices shake the ground. Shake foundations with the sound. Everybody on the ground. Don't hesitate, get on the ground. Let your voices shake the ground. Shake foundations with the sound. Silence isn't working. Silence isn't freedom. Anger is in the air. The voices of many are louder. Everybody start a war. Don't let them push you down. Everybody start a war. Gotta get up from the ground. Everybody start a war. Don't let them push you down. Everybody start a war. Gotta get up from the ground.
And that whole record is like real as fuck to me, in the sense that like that represented a lot of very dark times for not just me, but a lot of the people that are around me. And here's the good and the bad about it. The good thing is that it's very authentic. Like, it's actually really what happened to me. And so, like, however it comes across, that's the truth. The second part about it is that it's so depressing. It's at times that it's like one of those one listen records. It's like, in reality, like, you don't really want to listen to that type of thing a lot, because we just went through this. Like, we don't want to keep feeling this way. And so now the question is, how can I balance the truth of how things are and how I feel in my songwriting, while also giving you something to have fun to, right? Like, that's a different problem. That's a different sort of creative prompt, right? It's a tough thing to solve. And so the next record that I'm working on is basically somewhere in between that, where it's like very sober, kind of fucked up lyrics,
Right.
but it sounds like party music in a sense. And like, oh, like, this would be fun to play live, or this would be fun to hear at a party, or this would be like something that I would want to put on if I was on the road or something. But underneath all of that is just like, oh yeah, this is actually pretty fucked up. And like, that's exactly the vibe I'm going for right now.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, you know?
I'm into it. That sounds awesome. That sounds dope. That sounds like what I listen to every day, honestly. Is like, you know what I mean? Like, in a way, like, we're both probably we're both big fans of Health, man. And like, that's one band that like keeps it fucking real to the point of being uncomfortable a little. You know what I mean? Like, listening through, any other records, like, paying attention to the lyrics, like, the music is wonderful and everything, but like, man, the lyrics keep it fucking real to the point of, feeling like, wow, this is like some inner voice kind of shit going on.
Exactly.
It's wild how they've been able to balance that with the music to make it, like you said, accessible, or like you can revisit it, I guess. It surprises me a little bit just that you would say that about your own record, of like just being like, maybe that's because you went through it, so maybe you wouldn't want to revisit it.
Well, so actually, it's really interesting you say that, because I have a couple of friends who are like in the radio world, and like one of them was like, "Oh, like, I'm so excited for User's new record. Here's the link to the new record." And he goes, "But I got to be honest with you, I can't imagine myself listening to this a second time. Like, it was a really dark period for me." And I was like, "Yeah, that's actually really true. I hadn't thought about that, but that's like how I feel too." And then I realized that like the listener behavior for this record compared to other releases that I had did actually reflect that. And it was one of those things where like there were certain singles that when I put them out as singles and I promoted them really hard, they got a lot of like repeat listens. But like as a whole, the record even though those were all the most successful singles I'd ever put out, on the whole, the record performed in a way that indicated that people had a hard time listening to the album. And the fact that people were telling me straight up, like, man, this is too depressing. It's like, oh, yeah, like, okay, that's funny because, like, it took me 18 months of, like, trials and tribs to get through this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't even intend to write this. I didn't even want to write this, but this is just what happened. And at the end of the day, once I had all the songs in place, I needed a way to make them all make sense together. And so I started recording just like voiceover, like narrative form, kind of like connector pieces between them. So it was like spoken word pieces, you know? So it'd be like, here's like the happy section, and like, oh, now I'm gonna narrate into like the period of like super fucked up, like, you know, like hitting rock bottom section. No, now I'm going to talk about what happened in the world around me.
Right.
Like, and now I'm going to talk about how I'm trying to like figure it out and like escape all this stuff. So like basically I used that as the glue at the very end to just like make the album chronologically make sense as like a piece of work. And
Right.
it's cool. And some people have like told me that like, oh man, this feels like a time capsule. Like truly it feels like a time capsule. At the same time, it was very painful for people. A lot of people fell into
Sure.
like substance abuse. A lot of people lost their family members. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people had no light at the end of the tunnel. And so to have an album that's literally about that,
Right. I mean, it's a very painful time for
Yeah.
for all of us, really. But I think what comes across in your music and what comes across in your performance, both, at least to me, and what I found engaging is that like it is very sad content, and it is very, but it's like the best way I can explain it is that it feels like, you know, it's the Miami Vice like reflective sunglasses, you know, and
Yeah.
like we're having a good time, and it's like, oh, we're drinking champagne, and it's like we're drinking to push the pain down, kind of a
Yes,
kind of a like,
this is exactly right. And
you
so
know,
like,
the like
I agree with you there.
I love that juxtaposition, and I think that, you know, those two concepts playing off each other in the music is what endeared me to it. Honestly, was that it was
That's
like,
really,
you know,
yeah.
you're up there like, you know, you walk out and my presentation, my optics of it was like this white guy comes out and, you know, white clothes with his glowy guitar and his glasses, and like play some pop music, but it's sad as fuck, and like it feels so like, hey, we're all putting on an act, but hey, let's at least dance and like have a good time, even though we all want to die. Like it, that was my perception, and I was like,
That
man,
is
these are
exactly
fun.
right. Yeah, that is exactly right. And that's actually funny because like that those lyrical themes are even more like sort of like on the nose in like the latest music that I'm putting out, because it's like, you know, I have a song called Crazy that I just finished that is about like all the sort of like weird contradictions that we live in, like the fact that we have more access to information than we've ever had, yet everyone is like more blind somehow to truth than they've ever been.
Right.
Or like people are like fighting to like protect their own like body sanctity, and yet they're trying to take it away from other people, or they're trying to, you know,
Right.
be in love, and yet we're more disconnected than we've ever been. Like this is like, hey, look at this crazy world we live in now. Like that's, you know, one of the themes. And then I've got another record or another song that I'm working on that is basically about like sort of like the desire to sort of like numb yourself to everything, like
Right.
fucking the pain away, and like, you know,
Sure.
just all the things that we do to sort of like self-medicate ourselves away from like the shit that we feel. But like putting it to party music is like funny to me,
Oh, me too.
because like
It's
I feel
fucking
like it's
awesome.
just such a weird combination of things. And so like whenever I like talk to somebody in an elevator and they're like, "Oh, what's your sound? Like what do you sound like?" I say like, "Oh, it's like dystopian pop music, in the sense that like it sounds fun and happy, but behind this, like under the surface, if you even listen to like a few lines of the lyrics, you're like, oh, this is actually really fucked up."
Yeah.
And that's exactly the vibe that I'm going for, is that I want people to sort of be deceived by the accessibility of it. And then once it's in, it's like, oh, this is probably not okay. like you know what I mean? Like that's what I
Yeah.
want. I want people to be like, oh, I should not be listening to this. This is actually really fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, how many beers have I had?
Yeah,
Maybe
like,
that should
oh,
be
this
my
is
last
fucked
one
up.
for the night.
Yeah,
Going down some dark roads.
yeah, exactly.
Well, it's good that you played at Mechanismus then, because there were some dark roads there that night that that were
Yeah,
receptive to what you were bringing.
yeah, I'm into it.
It was such a good addition. Honestly, like
I just appreciate that they
mhm,
took the chance on me because I know that like they have to sort of like sell tickets and they have to think about all the like the logistics of a festival, and there's all these super heavy acts and all this stuff. And I think like it takes a little bit of nuance to even like get what I'm going for there. And the
right.
fact that like the show promoters like at least know my music well enough to even consider me for that. I felt super flattered by that. And I was
Hmm.
like so stoked to be able to even just give that show, give that performance to that crowd because I was like, oh, this is a bucket list sort of like situation. Like this is
Yeah,
probably never gonna happen again, and like I'm gonna have fun with it.
yeah.
You know?
And man, that what a great crowd! What a wonderful crowd! Like everybody there was so great. Like,
Oh yeah,
it's so nice
we
to
were
show
leaning
up.
into it, man.
Oh, for sure. And it was so nice on like the Battle of the Band streams to be like, oh, hey, Crane's here, and oh, hey, this person, and
Yeah,
all
all these
that,
folks.
like all these people who were at the festival. Like it's,
I had all these friends on that live stream too, and that's what's really
yeah,
funny is that like I don't really consider myself like industrial, but I do have a lot of
mm,
overlap with like a lot of those folks. And so like I got a call kind of randomly from one of the promoters that I know like outside of Seattle. I was like, "Hey, I don't know if you've ever heard of Aesthetic Perfection, but like you should enter for
mm,
this thing." And it's basically like we all have to just like enter ourselves is basically the gist
yeah,
of
yeah,
that whole contest. And so I was like, okay. And it was one of those things where like full disclosure, I had actually never heard their music before. And so I
sure,
started checking them out and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Like it would be a fun opportunity. So I'll just add my stuff. And in no way did I expect to do well in that, by the way.
right,
Like it was one of those things where it's just like there are people who really, really want this, and then there's like me, and then I'm like I'm almost like a ringer. I'm like on the outside of this looking in. But like
right,
the fact that people even voted for me for that, and like I actually got pretty decent turnout too, which was
for
like
sure.
shocking to me. Like I think I lost my round by one vote, literally. And I was just like, oh fuck. Like I was like, that's hilarious. Like because if I were to like actually get on the stage for this thing, like that would be like injustice for a lot of these people, and I like don't want to be that
Mm,
guy. And so I'm kind of it was kind of one of those things where like in hindsight I was like I don't know man, like maybe I should like be more careful about this.
yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want to like insult anybody either, you know.
Oh
Like I
no,
do
no,
care
no.
about like my peers like having respect, you know. I just I want people to feel respected and stuff, and it's just like the fact that I was kind of even there, like it felt like kind of funny to me, but I don't know. It
It
was
was
cool that
nice.
people voted for me.
Oh, for sure. I voted for you. It
Appreciate
was,
that, dude.
and I'm sure a lot of the votes that you got, I mean, people turned out because of Mechanismus. I mean, I saw a lot of names that, um, I mean, I was there for the whole festival, so like the people in the chat for that Battle of the Band stream that you were on was like, a lot of the people who were there. Like, I mean, it was like a
Yeah,
reunion.
that's
Like, oh,
crazy,
I
man.
still interact with a lot of those people on Facebook and everything pretty regularly. So it was like those were the people who turned out, and those were the people who were
That's
like, "Oh
crazy.
fuck yeah, I'm gonna vote for user." So
Yeah, fuck yeah, that's sick, dude. I'm like, I'm always like, dude, I'll just tell you this, like,
yeah,
when you create stuff and you put it out in the world, you don't know like what's gonna strike a nerve with people, right? You
mm,
really don't know. And like, I
no,
wrote a song called Chemistry a while back on my first record, which was
mm,
about a near-death experience that I had. Like, so basically, the song Chemistry, there's like a chorus in there that says, "Today is a good day to die." um, and said something inside because the chemistry of me doesn't want to be alive, right? And the
mm,
lyric is referring to the fact that one time I had like some crazy anaphylactic episode and I found myself suffocating and then I blacked out and I almost died, right?
mm,
And it was one of those things where like it was basically me talking about like how I went from like feeling like all was right and then all of a sudden everything was wrong and I was just like flatlining, right? Like this kind of
sure,
thing that happened in my life and I did not see coming. and I had no control over it. The chemistry of my body made all the decisions. And I had that song out. And if you don't know me, you don't know that story, you don't know what that song's really about. And I had somebody reach out to me on social media saying that like they were having a hard time like in life, and they were like, I was reading between the lines. They were basically telling me that they were thinking about like end of life for themselves kind of situation, and that song had been like describing how they felt, and they felt like it was helping them sort of like communicate like their feelings, and they were like helped by the song in a way. And it was like shocking to me. It like was like a moment of clarity to me that like the moment you put out a piece of art into the world is no longer yours. That is exactly right. Everyone who says that is right. And the second thing is that like you don't know how it's going to slap for other people. Like people are going to interpret shit in their own way through their own lens and worldview. And so it really was actually one of the main reasons why, and just circling back on the original topic we were talking about like authenticity and just truthful storytelling is like that was actually one of the reasons why I was like, oh, from here on out, I'm only going to write things that like I personally feel like. I'm not going to like make shit up. I'm just going to write about shit that I personally feel, or like experiences that I've had, because like if it happened to me and it scared me and it like made me feel a certain way, then like 99% of the time, like there's somebody in the world who is feeling the same thing, and like maybe they will vibe to this.
Right.
And like, and it's just like, it's crazy as an artist to like have that moment where you're like, oh fuck yeah, like that's heavy. I didn't realize that was going to be taken that way. But
Sure.
who knows? You never know. You just never know. And it's like the fact that like music even has the ability to translate like that to people, even when we suck, even when we're not even like good yet. Like that was my first record. There was a lot of things wrong with my first record. I'm still like learning, growing. And that song was like the fourth cut on that first record. And that was the time that person said that to me. And I was just like, now me looking back 3 albums sooner, soon to be 4 albums sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many different ways that I would have approached that record. But that particular song was the nugget that basically planted the seed for all of the other ways that I started writing music.
Okay, it's one or the other. It's not a nugget and
a
seed. It's one.
Yeah.
Choose one.
Yeah,
Man.
sorry. You know what I'm saying.
No, I got
it's one
you.
of those things where it's like that was the thread that ran through like early days to the later days. And it was just, like it was crazy to like realize that was even possible, because we often like tell ourselves that what we do doesn't matter. That's all I'm getting at.
No, I got you, and I agree. I was paying attention to what you were saying, and I just was like, wait, these analogies are not adding up. Like, are we a nugget? Are we a seed?
We got
What's
these
going
Lego
on?
blocks. We got chicken nuggets. We got the.
I'm on my own, wandering alone. Night is cold and my heart is on its own again. I'm on my own again. I'll reach for my phone, there's no dial tone. Feel your heart is slipping away from me again. Away from me again. But I just can't stop, you're stuck in my thoughts. And this feeling hurts in my heart like a shot. Gotta get you back to me. That I can't see, supernatural. You got power over me, supernatural. Like a touch that I can't see, supernatural. The way you capture me, supernatural. Like a touch that I can't see, supernatural. You got feet on the ground. I can taste your spirit in the air. It covers me in truth they bear. But I can't stop when you're in my thoughts. This feeling hurts in my heart like a shot. Gotta get you back, gotta get you back to me, yeah. When I draw the way you capture me, supernatural, like a touch that I can't see, supernatural. You got power over me, supernatural, like a touch that I can't see, can't see, can't see, supernatural. The way you capture me, supernatural, like a touch that I can't see, supernatural. You got power over me, supernatural, like a touch that I can't see, can't see, can't see.
But no,
Analogy
I
style.
I do agree with you. Like it is, and it's I don't know. I'm glad that you're making the music that you are. Honestly, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, and like I almost feel like I'd want to take User and sort of put it in front of more goths, I guess, and just be like, look at how fun we can have. Look at the fun we can have with this. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, yeah. To
So-
that point, let me tell you two encouraging pieces of information here. The
Okay.
number one, in Seattle, the goth crowd is by far my main fan base. So, like, in the sense that when I play shows, like, the goth crowd are the folks that show up. That's the
Right.
cool thing. And so, like, they do seem to actually vibe with my music already. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that I recently was invited with shout out to DJ Rota. I was actually invited to play at the what did they call it? There's like this goth nightclub in Capitol Hill, and it is called, I'm like literally
The
blanking
Mercury?
right now. Holy Mercury, yes.
Oh.
And when I played there, I was like, "Hey, are there any rules right now?" And they're like, "No. Do whatever you want." And so I played like a combination of like heavy dark shit and like fun dance like party shit. That was just the right combination of stuff. And my goth friends were there. By the way, shout out to Damon as well. Damon Shadow, right? Like he's the other dude who like works there and DJs there, and he was also invited me. Also super dope fellow. The thing that was awesome is that I was playing those tunes like Daft Punk, Swedish House Mafia, Skrillex, fucking like all these like weird like kind of mainstream like electronic things, but then like lacing it in with like dark sounding stuff, like really industrial like electronica. I kept hearing people going like, "Yeah, fuck yeah!" Like they loved the song choices because it was like reminding them of like the old days. They're like, "Oh yeah, I loved this song." Like I played a tune like a B-side off of like an old Daft Punk record, and somebody goes, "Oh my god, this is my favorite song from the '90s!" Like yelled out, and I was just like, "I feel you."
Right.
Like this is my favorite song from the '90s too.
Yeah.
Like we are aligned.
Nice.
And so I don't know. I just feel like no matter how.
Oh, I'm
serious
glad that
or
you
tough
feel
or-
like welcomed. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
like,
no matter
that
how
was-
serious or whatever, like anybody kind of comes across, like basically, like the thing that we all have in common is we love a good groove. We love music that slaps. We love fucking having a good time. Nobody wants to just be depressed all the time. Like we're all there to have a good time. Honestly.
That's right. For sure.
Show.
Speaking of which, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you the last question of the podcast. What's something that you've been enjoying lately? Your answer can
Oh,
be anything.
musically?
Yeah, just whatever, or musically or otherwise.
Ooh. Well, so we're in this like kind of like funny situation where like we found ourselves in a renaissance of TV
Mhm.
where like movies have sort of died and network television has sort of died, and now like all of a sudden like streaming TV is like in this renaissance where they're putting all of their money into this. Oh, there's so many amazing shows out now. So like that's the shit that gets me super excited is just seeing like all this like super high art coming out. Like the fact that like shows are just like taking big risks and like investing a ton.
Mm.
Like there's just so much good shit out there. And I'm not gonna talk about any of like the really like niche stuff, but like what I will say is this is that like the fact that like there's a Lord of the Rings reboot and a Game of Thrones reboot at the same time competing head to head with each other is fucking incredible. And it's so fun to listen to these like super opinionated fans like yell at each other all the time as gazillions of dollars are getting put into these shows. And
Yeah.
we're just so lucky to be living in this time right now. Like there's so much good shit out there.
Right. And then they come out and everybody just shits all over them.
Oh, fucking dude! I swear to God, like, here's what I'll say about this is that like, this is like the 20th show in a row now that I've had to like enjoy a show while simultaneously trying to ignore all the assholes on the internet, and like, I've come to the, I've come to the sort of realization that people right now in this moment in time like feel like their opinion is way more important than it really is. Like for whatever reason people think their opinions matter and they don't. But like it's one of those things where it's just like I'm gonna bash this thing because I don't think it was true to the whatever book. You know, it's like give a fucking
Your
get
your
over
opinion
yourself,
is
dude.
only as true as loud as you can make it. So
Yeah, and it's like who cares, dude? Like who cares? Just enjoy the ride, dude. Like we're all
yeah.
gonna die
No,
soon.
for
Like
sure.
get over
No,
it. You know, like,
I agree. Like I don't have time to spend like trying to shit on things. I'd much rather talk about things that make me happy, things that I enjoy. Like and I get that. I agree. I appreciate your perspective on that because I do think that people tend to take for granted what growing up, I remember having to watch the same movie because I didn't have any other motherfucking movies to
bro,
watch.
I used to watch the same shit over and over and over and over again.
Like,
Like,
for
you know what I'm
real.
talking about.
Yeah, so now
Like,
it's like, oh, do I want to watch this old movie from my childhood? No, I fucking don't. I want to watch something fucking new. Like, I don't,
well, I will say this: Back to the Future and Tommy Boy, no matter what, will always be good. Um,
I've
but
got like a handful. I have like a list of like less than 10 films that I will willingly sit and rewatch. Just
yeah,
because
we all have
like
them.
I get so restless and I'm like, oh, I gotta go watch fucking something else, something new.
And okay, and so here's another one though: is like outside of TV,
Mm.
music, right? So music. So like, I'm a big fan of like people like combining sounds, right? So like you know me, I like making music that sounds like a lot of things because that's where I come from. And one of the records that really stood out to me recently was Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross paired up with Halsey, and they made that record. If I can't have love, then I want power, or whatever it was called. I can't remember
Yeah.
exactly what it was called, but like people were so mad because like she doesn't deserve to, like whatever their fucking opinion was about this. But here's what's crazy about this album to me is like she was like basically cast out of her family. She was a drug addict. She was homeless. She was a prostitute. She succeeded and like got her shit together and got her life together and basically became like this like super successful artist and wrote this amazing record that basically sounds like all the best shit from the old Nine Inch Nails records.
Mm.
And it's true to her and it's like a new version of it. And that record just like scratches a bunch of different itches for me. I love that record. I think it's so cool. And like the fact that like Trent is not above making a record like that with somebody who's like a quote unquote pop star and like I could give a
Mm.
fuck what people think on the internet. I just think that record is great. And it's like
Yeah.
I want more of that to happen. More of that. So like
I agree.
who do you think would be a cool pairing like in this world? Like that like maybe would be a crazy thing to hear someday.
Mm. I do like genre bendy stuff, and actually, this idea popped into my head the other day. I would love to hear like a Behemoth album get
Mhm.
remixed by like Morris Black and shit. Like
Okay.
or like a
Yeah, yeah,
Morris
like that kind
Black
of like heavy,
remix
like
of like a
industrial, like
Behemoth. But I mean,
EDM.
I feel like ESA kind of like did like a black metal-y kind of a song. So I mean, like I feel like he's kind of like already set the standard for kind of a thing. But man, I don't know.
Well,
That's
here's
a good
another one that
question.
was really fun for me. Is like I
Mm.
heard Kendrick Lamar. He did that song
Oh, actually,
Humble,
quick, real
and he
quick.
did
Sorry,
yeah
let me interrupt you really quick because
yeah.
we were just talking about Trent Reznor. Actually, one of my, I feel like remixing other people's work is like it's an art form, right? At least I
Oh
feel like
yeah.
it because I mean, like you can do a really shitty job or you can do a really amazing job. And Trent Reznor back in the day remixed Puff Daddy, and if you've never heard it, it is fucking banging. It is so good. Oh man, it is so good. It is amazing. I highly recommend it.
Fuck yeah. Actually, so that's really funny. I played back in the winter time of 2022, well, 2021. I was invited to play with DJ Rota in Seattle at a hip hop club in Pioneer Square in Seattle.
Mm,
And to sort of like pay homage to the room that I was in, I actually made remixes of Lil Nas X, Notorious B.I.G., and 50 Cent in like my style. And I was basically just like, tearing them up, like just like doing all sorts of weird kind of like vibey synth effect, like heavy shit with their like vocals over it. And
yeah,
it was so fun and it was so
yeah,
satisfying to me. Like, so I totally agree with you. Like that kind
yeah.
of shit is my jam all
Oh
day.
man, and I'm so fucking glad that we have an artist in the world like horror. Oh fuck.
Yeah, all day.
Oh yeah, for
100%.
sure. Yeah, I'm with you there.
100%. Anyway, so yeah, like we're in like the type of like world now where like
Oh, and
there's
health,
so
like
much.
health is like, oh, we're gonna do a song with Ghostbane, and then a song with Lamb of God, and a
Yeah.
song with, fuck yeah, dude. Like I'm all for like
Yeah,
that
100%.
communal, like let's all get together and enjoy sad music.
Well, here's the thing though, is like think about this is that like we're in like this time, this unique time in history where like there's so many different niche like subgenres of everything that nothing is special anymore. And so
Right.
now the barriers that would have originally stopped people from doing that because like, oh, it won't sell or whatever. It's like,
Right.
no, really like we're far beyond that, like that worry now. Like everything is oversaturated. So now what you're getting is all these people taking risky sort of like collaborations and doing interesting shit that like would have never happened before. Like you think
Yeah.
about there's that song Humble by Kendrick Lamar and he did that remix with Skrillex. That is the fucking heaviest song ever
Mm.
through the Skrillex version of it. It is so sick, and I'm just like the fact that like this even exists is like a testament to like the weird time we're living in, and like I'm like I love it. Keep
Yeah.
bringing it on, and
Yeah.
just
Exactly.
recognize that we're in like this renaissance right now, and it may feel hopeless, like oh my shit will never get heard because there's too much saturation. Like no, on the other hand it's like recognize like we're in this lucky position that now we get to hear stuff that we would have never heard otherwise. So like it's
Yeah.
so awesome.
Yeah. It's fucking. It's sweet because I mean, like now it's way easier for people to just reach out and like work. You know,
Oh yeah.
work together easier than ever before. Like, oh man, it's
Yep.
fucking awesome. Like, I can't wait to see what industrial music and I mean all music really like looks like in the next few years. Just because like I love that genre bending shit and like
Oh yeah.
I'm all for it. So
So
yeah,
shameless plug. Speaking of remixes, so
yeah,
I
yeah.
one of my buddies out here in Seattle, his name is Watch Clark, and named Paul. Watch Clark is a local sort of Depeche Mode sort of artist, right? Like has that vibe to him, and great artist. He invited me to remix one of his tunes for like a remix album he was doing, and I did a song for him that sounds to me like all of the things that I loved about Nine Inch Nails, The Perfect Drug, has a bunch of like user-esque sort of like weird like bassy like moments where just like super weird, a lot of
Mm,
syncopation, and that particular remix is probably my favorite remix I've ever done, just because like it didn't make sense on paper, but when you hear it, you're like, okay, this is dope, and
mm-hmm.
like and every time I play it, I have to just turn the volume up. I'm like, this is like a sick track. And like it's one of those things where I'm like, man, I wish I had thought to write like this like sooner. But it was one of those things where creatively, when you like mix just the right combination of things that don't seem like they belong together, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is actually a really interesting opportunity to do this weird thing right here in this weird moment. And like, what if I did this drum fill or this like vocoder thing or like whatever? And then all of a sudden you're just like, wow, this is fucking unique. Like, this is cool. And that remix turned out to be my favorite. So if you haven't heard it, go check it out. It's called Propaganda Works. And what's really funny is that he and I share a lot of like the same opinions in terms of like, hey, like here's like the weird road that society is on in terms of like us being distant from one another because of like social media and all the weird shit. And so like the song that he wrote, Propaganda Works, was about basically how like no matter how much people lie to you in politics, we still keep electing them. Why? Because they do propaganda and it's effective. Propaganda works. That's why. And it was one of those things where it's like, man, this song fucking feels like a user song, dude. Like this is exactly the type of shit that I would have written if I had been inclined to write about that topic, right? And it was like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to remix this. And once I got it done, I was like, dude, I love this song now. It's like one of my favorites. So anyway, if you haven't heard it, go check it out. It's pretty cool.
I will, absolutely. I mean, like I've had that experience where I hear a piece of music that I'm like, man, I wish I'd made this. You know, like fuck, wow, where was I?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel about a lot of stuff. I'm like, man, I wish I had that idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, and for, you know, setting aside some time to chat and making this work. And man, I'm like I'm super thankful that you wanted to chat with me. Thanks for giving me an hour of your time. It's been really fun. Good, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And you know, I have been enjoying it a lot. And I did have this. I felt